Biopsychology, also known sometimes as biological basis of behavior or neuropsychology, is a field that looks at what is happening in the body and in your nervous system when psychological disorders happen. I know this chart is a little blurry, hard to see, but I would like to talk about it so that you'll understand the different parts of your nervous system. First off, your body is made of two types of systems. Your central nervous system, which includes your brain and spinal cord. Your central nervous system is responsible for processing, interpreting, storing information, sending orders to your muscles, glands, and organs. And the spinal cord serves as the link between your brain and your peripheral nerves. So your central nervous system is one of your nervous systems. The other one is your peripheral nervous system. That transfers information to and from the central nervous system via the spinal cord. Within the peripheral nervous system, you have your somatic nervous system, which is in control of all of your skeletal muscles, and your autonomic nervous system, which regulates your glands, your blood vessels, and all of your organs. Within the autonomic nervous system is the sympathetic and parasympathetic areas. The sympathetic area is responsible for energy output and action. It's kind of like fight or flight. It's your panic area. Your parasympathetic nervous system is the calming area. It's going to conserve your energy and help you maintain a quiet state. Your body is made up of billions of neurons. They provide the basic building block of your nervous system. They have three basic functions. Their jobs are to receive, carry, and pass on information to the next neuron. So let's take a closer look at what a neuron can be. You can have sensory neurons, motor neurons, and interneurons. Sensory neurons are also sometimes called afferent neurons. They carry incoming information from your senses, that's why they're called sensory neurons, to your central nervous system. Your motor neurons, think motor, think movement, think muscles. They carry outgoing information from the central nervous system to your muscles, to your glands. Interneurons are neurons that connect most other neurons to each other. Most of the neurons in your body can be interneurons. And here's a motor neuron, and here's a sensory neuron. We're going to talk about the parts of the neuron from a motor neuron standpoint because it's got the most development to it. So first off, you have these tree-like branches to a neuron. They're called dendrites. They receive messages from other cells. Next, we have the soma. The soma is this inside part of the neuron, the big part, that also can be called the cell body. It is responsible for maintaining the health of the neuron. It's almost like your cleaning system. Here we have this long part known as your axon. Through your axon, messages are able to pass from the cell body to other neurons, muscles, and glands. That passage of information that goes down the neuron is known as a neural impulse. There's this fatty substance that kind of looks like these bubbles here that cover the axon. That is known as myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is what helps speed the information down the axon. There's a disorder known as MS, or multiple sclerosis, which researchers have found that people who have multiple sclerosis have a deterioration of myelin sheath on the axon of neurons in their brain. Because of that, sometimes they have trouble moving, they have trouble functioning and their memory can be clouded because those neurons are not able to fire the way they should. And lastly, you have terminal branches. They are the ends. They've got these little buttons on the end, and they form junctions with other cells to release information. Neurons can look very different, but they all have the same basic structure. They look like they have the dendrites. Think of the dendrites like your fingers. Then they have the soma or cell body. Think of that as your palm. And then they have the axon, like your arm, if you're trying to think of your hand being a neuron. Neurons send messages to other neurons, and these things happen on a regular basis, and they happen very quickly, and that's how you move, that's how you communicate, that's how things within your body work. The information that is released at the terminal branches or the terminal buttons are something called a neurotransmitter. And what happens with a neurotransmitter is, the information is able to leak out here. These little things and these little red dots are the neurotransmitter that's being sent to another axon. This information that travels from the dendrites through the axon is known as an action potential. And an action potential is fired, or this electrical charge happens whenever a message is being sent. Now, action potentials can't happen all the time because there's something known as a refractory period. That's a period of time when an action potential cannot occur because it has to recharge. Resting potential is waiting for another action potential to be generated. I always give the example of thinking of a toilet. When you first go into the bathroom to use the toilet, it is at rest. That's the resting potential. It's waiting to be used again. Then after you go to the bathroom and you flush, the flush of the toilet is like an action potential. It happens, it's going to flush or not flush. If it's a healthy toilet, it's going to flush all the way. It's not going to flush halfway. Then, right after you press that flush button, you cannot flush immediately again. That's your refractory period. You have to wait until the bowl fills up with water again before another action potential or flush can happen. Agonists and antagonists help speed up or stop a neurotransmitter from giving its function. An agonist is a drug that stimulates or helps speed up a response at a receptor site, and an antagonist, inhibits or blocks a receptor at a receptor site. So this is what I mean. A neurotransmitter are the natural chemicals that exist in your brain. They have to be transmitted between neuron and neuron, and that happens at those terminal buttons through what's called the synapse. Agonist drugs are going to help these neurotransmitters along, help them get to where they need to go, or antagonists are going to block them from getting to where they need to go. That's why using drugs can sometimes have a negative effect, because some of the drugs are acting as antagonists and not allowing those neurotransmitters to get to where they need to be. There are about 15 to 20 neurotransmitters known at present time, but there are some that are more influential in psychology than others. So we're going to talk about those naturally occurring chemicals in your brain that most relate to psychology. Here are the 7 that most relate to psychology: serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, norepinephrine, gamma-aminobutyric acid, or what we call GABA, glutamate, and endorphins. We're going to talk about these in detail. If you'll look at this chart, acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that is released by your motor neurons to help control your muscles. And it also can regulate your ability to have attention, arousal, and your memory. So for purposes of this class, I want you to remember acetylcholine's function in memory, because if there's not enough acetylcholine in the brain, it can lead to Alzheimer's disease. Acetylcholine receptors can be stimulated by nicotine, and that might be why many people who are having dementia or memory issues may smoke, because they're trying to activate those parts of their brain that aren't active. Dopamine is involved in movement, learning, attention, and pleasurable emotions. I want you to remember, when it comes to dopamine, that there has been research done that says that there's a dopamine hypothesis when it comes to schizophrenia. People who develop schizophrenia often have too much dopamine in their brain. People who don't have enough dopamine can develop conditions such as Parkinson's disease. Serotonin is our mood neurotransmitter. It affects your mood, hunger, sleep, arousal, kind of areas that are related to what we call the hypothalamus. An undersupply of serotonin is going to lead to depression, sometimes obsessive compulsive disorder, and that person would have to take an antidepressant drug. So remember, for serotonin, that it's the mood neurotransmitter. There's not enough serotonin, it's going to lead to depression. For dopamine, if there's too much, it leads to schizophrenia. If there's not enough, it can lead to Parkinson's disease. Not enough acetylcholine will create memory problems such as Alzheimer's disease. And this just gives you an example of serotonin regulating mood and dopamine being involved with schizophrenia, and then also Parkinson's disease. And we know that Muhammad Ali and Michael J. Fox both have Parkinson's disease. So they have not enough dopamine running through their brains. Norepinephrine is a neurotransmitter that helps control alertness, mood, and arousal. It can also lead to a depressed state, but serotonin is much more involved in that. Norepinephrine is not as big of a neurotransmitter as the other. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter that can oftentimes lead to seizures, tremors, and insomnia. Endorphins are your body's natural painkillers. They can help a person feel what's called a runner's high. It kind of mimics the effect of morphine. And then glutamate is involved also in memory. If there's an oversupply, it can stimulate the brain. It can also play a role in seizures. Now let's take a look at the various areas of the brain. In your book, you can see what a lot of these areas are responsible for. The main things you need to know is that the hippocampus plays a role in your memories. The amygdala plays a role in your emotions. And the hypothalamus plays a role in pleasurable things, eating, sleeping, things of that nature. Your spinal cord is what sends the information up to your brain to communicate. Your occipital lobe is located at the back of your head, and that makes up your visual cortex. That way you can see forward. So remember, with occipital lobe, that's for your vision. Your parietal lobe, which is located on the top of your brain, is responsible for sensations, like your sensory receptors for touch and pain. Your temporal lobes are located on the sides of your brain, and that's responsible for your audition. So remember, it's close to your ears, so it's responsible for your hearing. And the frontal lobes are at the very front of your brain, and it's involved in executive functioning and then also your muscle movement. Your brain is divided into two hemispheres by an organ called the corpus callosum, which has lots of different axons that help those two sides of the brain communicate with each other. It's very important that the corpus callosum stays intact so that those two brain sides can communicate. Anytime that the corpus callosum has been severed, the brain parts cannot communicate, and then a person is not able to function the way they should. Many people often say, oh, I'm left brain, I'm right brain. Everybody uses all parts of their brain. It's just that the left brain has been found to be responsible for your ability to engage in analytic thought, logic, do well in science and math, languages. And the right brain is more responsible for your creativity, art and music, your intuition, and holistic thought. But remember, the corpus callosum helps both sides of the brain communicate with each other. So you want that to stay intact so that they can do that. Now, some people may have a preference for tasks that are involved in the left brain, but everybody has the capacity to use both parts of their brain. When it comes to your emotions, your left brain is responsible for your expression of positive emotions. If it's damaged, then you won't feel joy. If it's activated, you're going to feel like approaching people and you'll feel very friendly and happy. The right side of the brain is responsible for your expression of negative emotions. If it is damaged, then it's going to make you euphoric and you're going to always be happy. And if it's not activated, then you're probably going to stay to yourself and not want to be around other people. Your brain has plasticity. So if one area of your brain is damaged, other areas will try to overcompensate for that damage and reorganize themselves. If you think about it, the sense of touch is very prominent in people who are blind because that sense of touch is going to invade their visual areas of the brain so that they can still read Braille, so that they can still feel and get to where they need to go. Their hearing is often activated more because they can't see, and vice versa. So when those neurons are destroyed, nearby neurons are going to try to overcompensate because they're plastic. They are able to regenerate and take on new meaning. Broca's area, this area right here, is an area of the brain that's responsible for your language comprehension. If it's damaged, your speech will become impaired. One of the main ways that Broca's area can become damaged is if a person suffers from a stroke. They may have slowed speech. They may speak in a way that you cannot understand. If they're trying to say the word turnpike, it might come out like turnpike. So with Broca's aphasia, they can understand language but have difficulty speaking. With Wernicke's aphasia, and Wernicke's area is right here, it's also responsible for speech production. This person cannot comprehend what's said to them, although their language is still intact. So if you said to somebody with Wernicke's aphasia, how are you doing today? They might say, where did you go? I've been reading this book. They might just say something that doesn't answer your question because they didn't understand what you asked them. So remember, your somatic nervous system is going to connect your senses and your skeletal muscles, and your autonomic nervous system is going to regulate those internal organs and glands. When it comes to your endocrine system, this is your body's chemical communication system made up of hormones. Those hormones help regulate your growth, metabolism, sexual development, and other behaviors. So this is what your endocrine system looks like, and this is what it's made up of. Your thyroid and various areas related to reproduction. Now, when it comes to brain lesioning, that includes any type of damage or bruising or problems that have happened in various areas of the brain. So researchers have developed different ways of looking at problems that exist in the brain. One of them is using an EEG, which is taking neural recordings of activities on the scalp. So anytime a person participates in a sleep study, an EEG is used to see what's going on with them at night as they're sleeping. It's going to measure your brain waves. A CT scan will show images inside the brain. They're like X-ray photographs that are taken from different angles. It can show us if a person has a tumor or if they have any type of brain damage. A PET scan shows any type of biochemical activity that may exist in the brain. And that occurs by injecting the person with a glucose-like substance that has a radioactive element. So it's kind of like giving radiation, so we can see, is everything chemically working and looking the way it should. And also we have an MRI, which is a way to study brain and body tissue. It provides very clear 3D images. Many people who've ever played sports probably had MRIs to look at whether or not they had a broken bone or damaged tissue. A functional MRI is able to take a look at various MRI scans to look at blood flow and brain activity. So it can show us the function of the brain and its structure. And that's everything you need to know about biopsychology, or biological basis of behavior neuroscience.